the decade from 2008 to 2018, around 3 women a week were killed by men in the UK, and shockingly, around 1 in 4 has been raped or sexually assaulted. This shows the gravity of the misogyny in our society faced by women and girls. Although relationship education can only go so far in addressing male violence against women and girls, it plays an important role in educating our young people on what positive and healthy relationships look like and the importance of putting in place clear boundaries. These skills are vital in navigating relationships, recognising potential abuse, including that of coercive control, and knowing how and when to seek help. Relationship education was made compulsory in all primary schools and secondary schools in 2020. While schools are able to determine their own curriculum, they must have regard to the statutory guidance released in 2019. From my experience of looking at some of the school materials used, it seems that focus in relationship education has a tendency to gravitate towards other topics rather than spending the necessary amount of time on propagating positive and respectful relationships between boys and girls and addressing many of the issues raised today. This is something that schools and government need to reflect upon. An important part of relationship education is teaching young people about the risks and harms of the internet and social media. With damaging online porn available at the touch of a button on smartphones, young men are fed a constant stream of misogynistic content that will of course change how they view women and girls. Whilst they are able to access hours of degrading and violent content directed at women whenever they like, the relatively small amount of time spent learning the opposite in a classroom cannot hope to offset this harmful influence. That is why the Conservatives have been calling for a ban on smartphones in schools for under-16s. This will at least go part of the way to promoting children's well-being and protecting them from harmful content on social media during the school day. It's also important to note that for many young people, the distinction between the online world and the real world can be blurred. So they need the skills to navigate this safely. We all know that online people feel more anonymous and may say things that they would never say face-to-face, or they may present themselves as someone different to who they actually are. On top of this, they are fed a stream of factually incorrect information and unobtainable body images. In accordance with DfE guidance, schools should be alive to issues such as everyday sexism, misogyny, homophobia and gender stereotypes, and take positive action to build a culture where these are not tolerated. In spite of this, I'm afraid to say that sexual violence and harassment does take place in schools, so it's vital that such behaviours are not tolerated and never acceptable. Any reports of sexual violence or harassment should be taken seriously, and it must be recognised that girls are much more likely to be victims, with boys the most likely perpetrator. With that being said, it's vitally important that our boys are not made to feel that this behaviour is inevitable as a result of them being male, and indeed it is only a minority. When it comes to our boys, we should be valuing their unique attributes and not demonising them or making them feel bad for having masculine traits. These traits are not toxic in the great majority of cases. The requirement to deliver RHSE has led to a surge in outside providers making available their resources to school. Some are good and some are not so good. Guidance is clear that schools should not, under any circumstances, work with external agencies that take or promote extreme political positions or use materials produced by such agencies. Accordingly, schools are required to assess each resource to ensure it is age-appropriate and sensitive to their needs. And they should be providing examples to parents on request. Parents should be given every opportunity to understand the purpose and content of materials, and it is certainly not appropriate for such materials to be withheld under the guise of copyright restrictions. All parents have a right to know what a school is teaching their child. It was confirmed by the previous Education Secretary under the Conservative government that materials used in the classroom can be shared irrespective of copyright restrictions. It should never be forgotten that parents and carers are ultimately responsible for the education of their children. So in most cases, teaching in schools should be done with parents, not contrary to them, and in a way sympathetic to their values and beliefs. And that starts with being transparent about what is being taught. It's also important to note that schools have a legal obligation to be politically impartial when teaching. This means children must be offered a balanced presentation of opposing views. It seems that many schools have struggled with this impartiality requirement on this specific topic, which drove additional guidance to be released in 2018. and 22. I note the reference to a backlash against RHSE lessons due to anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric, and I want to push back on this. It is not unreasonable for parents to raise their concerns about schools teaching factually incorrect, ideological and damaging content specifically on gender identity. They are right to raise this, and it is indeed the responsible thing to do. But the one thing I do agree with is that the teaching of such harmful concepts as fact has done damage to the important subject of RHSE as a whole.